I click on my minimize window, and now I can monitor the hands up while Kristen helps me with the chat. Does that work?
So you're sharing a screen, Kathy, right?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, cool.
But on
And
my
it's an excellent chat monitor.
she's on it. Well, let me just do a quick check to make sure I've got all my presenters, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So I see the lovely Chris Boyle. Thank you, Mr. Boyle. We appreciate your presence. Ms. Hovden, are you on the line?
I am right here.
Woohoo!
Hi, everybody. I'm
Chuck
stuck to my
Duncan.
computer all day long.
Thank you, ma'am. Chuck Duncan, mass care genius extraordinaire. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here in body only right now.
I love it. That'll work. We'll take it. Mr. Hall, the recovery up and comer. Are you with us? Yes, you are. I see you right there.
I am here, present and accounted for.
Thank you, sir. How about Ms. Pang from logistics?
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Belinda. Mr. Rivera, are you on the line? Roberto Rivera. Roberto, are you on mute, perhaps? Well, hopefully he'll be joining us. He's got the agenda, and he's a little bit later, so we should be okay. And then the delightful Ms. Renice Bain from out in the Pacific Islands. Are you with us, Renice?
I will go make sure they have invitations and they're on their way.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, while we're waiting for the crew to show up, let's go ahead and kick it off. So our seminar for this evening, or our workshop for the evening, as you guys saw from the description, was introduced to Sandy and myself this way. You get that thought that runs through your head. I wish I'd known that before I had to endure the excruciating experience. And I think as leaders, we're often called on to meet unexpected challenges and really achieve our mission in ways that are creative and within the guiding principles of our great organization, the American Red Cross, but still may require something that you didn't perhaps pick up in an EDGE training course or one of our Red Cross courses. So when we were posed with this concept, Sandy and myself were like, how in the heck are we going to do this? So what we did initially was to reach out to our DRAMT team members who deploy quite a bit. And we solicited basically any lessons learned that they hope to share. So the panel of folks tonight that I'm going to get ready to introduce to you as I go through the agenda is basically the primary folks that provided contributions to that survey. So they'll be talking to you first about the lessons that they learned, and they're looking through a couple of different lenses. That should take up about 35 minutes of our evening. And then we're hoping that for the last 25 minutes, we really can engage you and pull from you any comments, responses, or your own lessons learned. So without further ado, the agenda for this evening, I'm going to keep talking for about 4.5 minutes. We're going to go into those 5-minute sessions from the folks that actually provided some input. And then we're going to run the group discussion. I'm going to ask you, if you are going to share a lesson learned tonight, you can do it one of two ways. You can either raise your hand and wait for Ms. Barnes to acknowledge you, or you can use the chat function. And I'm going to give you a very streamlined format for your entry into the chat. And I'm going to request that if you do elect to kind of share verbally, if you could limit your lesson to 3 minutes. Now, I know that won't provide all of you enough time to kind of share really valuable insights. So one of the things that we're going to do, and you should get an email after this class that provides you with a survey link. Please feel free to contribute to that survey. I'll consolidate your feedback, and then we'll send out one final member to all of the participants that have that kind of master list of your invaluable lessons learned. So your panelists tonight, Chris Boyle is going to kick us off, and Chris is really going to be looking from the lens of the operations management and directors cadre. And the lessons he's choosing to share, when we tried to chunk things out, fall into the bucket of leading versus doing. Laura Hovden will follow him with basically her lessons learned that fall into that same category, but she's really highlighting that point where you're making the transition from shelter supervisor to shelter manager, or from shelter manager to sheltering lead at a DRO headquarters. So really kind of looking through that lens and making the jump from having to do it yourself to really learning how to lead a team and empower them to help you get the mission done and serve clients. Once those two get done, we'll go ahead and go through a grouping of lessons learned, which we ended up categorizing as beyond gap training. Again, really some of those systems or process or tool type lessons that folks don't get in their EDGE training, and you might not get on a smaller scale response, but you kind of develop that toolbox and gaining the confidence to know that it's okay if you don't know that right away, and some tips and tools about how to seek mentors and put together your toolbox for that beyond the gap training thing. And then we're gonna kind of wrap it up with the final couple of entries. Unfortunately, Sandy's not able to join us tonight, but we will have Roberto if he's able to join. He had some really interesting experiences as a first-time assistant director deployed to Puerto Rico, and Renice can kind of, she'll be talking about some really good lessons that she learned about how to develop trust in herself by using other team members for mentorship. So before we kind of really kick off with Chris's feedback, I thought it was interesting, and I'm hoping that you're as interested by this as I am. I ran some data about the composition of folks that registered for this class tonight, and it's a pretty interesting view. Basically, I cross-referenced your attendance records on, I think, the 19th. So if you signed up after that, I apologize, you're not included here. But the representative sampling, 42% of you have gone outside of your region on a deployment less than 5 times. 33% of you have gone out more than 5 times, but less than 10 times. 6% of you have gone out more than 10 times, but less than 15 times. 15% of you have gone out more than 15 times, but less than 20 times. And then finally, 2 of you have gone out for more than 20 deployments. And so those 2 of those folks are on the panel, and I want to just kind of highlight them today. So Chuck Duncan, bless his heart, has gone out on 24 deployments outside of his region recently. Now, the second one is Mr. Boyle. And Mr. Boyle, it's kind of beyond bless his heart and into the territory of we may have to have him committed. He has been out 84 times over his Red Cross career on an outside of region, larger scale deployment. The other thing about that is I think it enhances his credibility, because basically if there's a mistake that can be made in the Red Cross, Chris has probably made it at some time or another. And yet he has survived. He is one of the premier job directors in our organization. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Chris so he can provide us with some of his leadership lessons learned about leading on a DR. Chris, the floor is yours.
When you say it like that, I mean, I must be ancient beyond belief, for one thing. That is hilarious. It has been a lot of deployments though, and yes, I have definitely made mistakes along the way. Kathy and I had a good chat about this last week, and I'm just gonna dive in here because I know we've got a lot of folks to chat. The first one that I wanted to highlight was something that I was able to experience that I wanted to make sure I didn't do, or at least did everything in my power to control, and that was ensuring that I don't waste a worker's time. I think the time that volunteers and paid staff give to this organization is incredibly valuable. It's the most important thing we have, and and we need to value. I can't say it enough. The experience I had was in a wildfire in California way back in 2007. We thought we had an event that was going to be extremely big. We flew everybody and their brother in to make sure that we were able to take care of clients, and we were ready to do that. And I was very proud of that. However, it didn't result in the response that we thought we were going to have. And so the lesson learned was really try to find that balance between what you need and what you can accomplish immediately, and making sure that the workers you bring in are able to complete meaningful work in the process. My lesson learned on that was had to do with our planning assumptions, and really trying to figure out, trying to walk through the timeline of when an impact might occur, when you might need that particular resource, the worker, and how you can do a phased approach to try to make sure so that you get time to course correct along the way. And I tried to do that during the Oroville Dam collapse, which some of you may remember, or it wasn't a collapse, thank goodness, but that's what we were being ready for. And again, we brought in a lot of workers because we had, I think the number was upwards of 100,000 people under evacuation orders. It was a no notice. We had no idea how many people were going to be needed or would need shelter. And we brought in a lot of folks that did end up spending some time sitting around. I tried my best to go into the various rooms where they were being, held, if you will, or where they were waiting for their orders, and tried to keep them as updated as possible. And that I think is what I'd like you guys to hear, is keep your teams as updated as possible. If they know why they're there, if they know why we've established this level of readiness, but frankly, we don't know if we're going to need them, they're going to be more okay with it. If they're kept in the dark, they're going to start getting upset or annoyed with the feeling that we may be wasting their time. So that's kind of my first lesson. Don't waste the workers' time. Use your planning assumptions and developing your AOPs to make the best decision making that you can. The other one that I wanted to talk about was don't wait, right? Don't miss a chance to help somebody. And this is one that is probably a regret that I will have forever. Especially in our wildfire countries, we have a very limited window to support clients once reentry is allowed, right? Once the fire has burned through an area and clients are able to reenter that neighborhood or that community, chances are we don't have very long to be present for them and to provide comfort before frankly they go in, they see what's happened, and they probably won't hang around very long. And so we need to have, again, with developing those planning assumptions and being aware of what the reentry plans are, we can make ourselves ready to kind of jump when reentry is launched, and be there with bottled water and sifters and other products that clients might need. The lesson learned is I did miss it once. We did not have the information, and we did not find out that a community was going to be allowed reentry. We did not have our trucks and our supplies ready to go, and you can never get that back. And so that is why it's so important to keep your ears to the ground with your emergency managers and in the communities and incident command and all that. When is this going to happen? And communicate that up through leadership, or if you're serving as the job director, make sure you're asking your folks to know what's going on with that, because again, once you've missed that opportunity to help somebody, you don't get it back. That push to help people may result in you having to demonstrate how to help. Especially on some of our island responses, we can't send a large group of folks. And I remember one time, just to kind of get a ball rolling, I had to, hate to make it sound like this, but me, the job director, had to go into the warehouse and start building, kind of return home kits myself, because I wasn't communicating what the intent was. Folks didn't understand what we needed to do. Perhaps I was asking too much. I don't know, but I couldn't afford to wait, and I had to jump in and start doing it. Once I got in and I, demonstrated the process, everybody was on board, and we got the mission knocked out really quick. But you might have to go do it in order for folks to understand what you're asking and make sure it moves forward quickly. So.
Sometimes you have to do to lead. That was awesome. I'm not going to waste too much time on the transition here, so let's go ahead. I think next up it's Ms. Hovden. Laura, the floor is yours.
Hello. So my lessons have probably been done by most everybody. On my first big DR, I'd been shelter manager for smaller DRs, but on my first big one, I got there and we had everything that you can imagine. We had animals, we had elderly population, we had lots of rooms in a big facility. We had pre-disaster homeless. We had, I swear one day we had the police there every half hour. Next day it was the ambulance. The day after that, I was like, okay, what can be next? Well, guess what? We got bed bugs. We just had everything. And the thing that I learned is I can't be everywhere. I learned that I really have to manage and assign people. There were too many things going on for me to try to manage at one time. All day, I swear that my phone rang all day because people wanted to know the head count, how many people at the shelter. Somebody said later, oh, I just post that someplace where everybody can see. Well, I didn't have time to think about that. Little things like that. So assign things, assign supervisors. I did assign a supervisor to one building, but I should have broken down the jobs more and really assigned people to more different jobs than I did. I should have assigned somebody to be the point person for the public. One of the things that I didn't know that I do now is it would have been nice to have a site manager on to deal with the partners, because all day everybody was, I swear they were standing in line asking to talk to me all day, but you can't get everything done if you're just answering your phone and talking to these people. But there is a role called the site manager who deals with external partners. And had I known, I should have asked for somebody. I should have also asked for somebody to deal with the press. We had a lot of people coming in, wanted to ask questions about the shelter, the clients, the plans. Having somebody there from the press to handle the press would have been so helpful, because then they wouldn't all be asking to see me. The other thing is getting one of the first things is getting an assistant, somebody to help answer the phone, somebody to do the reports instead of waiting for them to call me for the reports that are all due, is have somebody assigned to do them on a regular basis, have them turned in at that time. Again, on a smaller DR, you don't have as much of exposure to that. But once it gets big, you really have to get that information in on a timely basis. Let's see, some of the other things that I learned is I wrote down be visual. And I realized I'm not a visual person. I didn't need all the, notes all over the board and the notes on the whiteboards. But I realized later other people do. And if I can't do that, if that's not a strength of mine, assign somebody to do it. Somebody who's good at that, because there are people who would be able to. I could have reduced the number of questions asked if I had had that information available. So make sure that is visible. Remember the night shift. Oftentimes in the shelter, there's so much goes on in the day, but as a shelter manager, you're also responsible for nighttime and all the nighttime staff. And a lot of times, I think in a DR, they tend to get a little more forgotten because they're not right there, but they have a different set of needs that we might not think about. I would also recommend, if you ever have a chance, to shadow somebody in the sheltering lead role in headquarters. If you If you have an opportunity to be at headquarters and see what they're asking and why they're asking for it, you go back to being a shelter manager and you're much more on it. You know, oh, I got to do this, and you understand the impact. It's not like, oh my gosh, they called me again asking me for my, lunch count. You have a better idea, and it builds your level of knowledge on how to run a shelter in a more efficient way, and then you know what to ask headquarters for. One of the lessons that I learned in being a sheltering lead, I learned from my mentor, Jim Mulleris. If you have a chance, arrive a little early and visit the shelters before you hit headquarters. So have a chance to walk around to the shelter. So the day you walk into headquarters, you might not leave for the rest of the time. You could very well be stuck in headquarters and not get to visit their shelter. So if you have a chance to see your shelters and talk to your shelter managers individually beforehand, I think that's very valuable. So there's my 5 minutes.
Laura, that was awesome. Thank you. And I think some nice tie-ins to Chris. So those decision data points that you're looking at and making decisions based off of, some of them derive from information that Chris, as the job director, is trying to pull. That was great. Understanding your folks in the field, that's fantastic too. I just want to thank you for that and move on to the next person. So let's go to the estimable Mr. Duncan. Mr. Duncan, what are you going to share with us tonight about your lesson learned and beyond GAP training?
Yes, literally beyond GAP training as well. I've learned that people are important, how to deal with people, but one of the things that really got me and that I didn't know, and I've learned to make sure that other people know, is forms. Now, I know we get to know our forms, like the shelter forms, the feeding forms, DES forms, as we progress up to manager in each one of those gaps. But once you get to that gap, then you have to be concerned about other forms. And I was never trained on those other forms until I was kind of put on the spot about the form. And that was the 215. And I learned a lot about the 215 very rapidly. And Harvey, I was a feeding lead at Harvey and with 13 kitchens and so forth. 215 becomes very important. Well, I didn't know that until I went into one of our tactics meetings, and our AD of Ops started asking me questions. We had somewhat of a 215 filled out, but not correctly and not completely. And so therefore I knew that I better learn the 215 before I went back to another tactics meeting. So I did learn it, where all the inputs go, the importance of the 215, because like Kathy said, those forms, that information goes up to people like Chris at DR directors and helps them make decisions. Also helps other people like logistics, how it would help them, the 215. So I would suggest that if you get to be a manager to that level, or before you get to be manager, start looking at the correct way how to fill out a 215. 5266 is another form, because that every time you fill out a 256, somebody's going to question you. Why does this not match versus that? So know why those blocks are filled in, the boxes are filled in, and where that information comes from, because then you can track that down and get the correct answer sometime. 204 is another one. But there's other forms. And like I said, once you get to be manager, that doesn't mean you don't have to learn more forms. I think you learn more important forms dealing with the whole operation at that time. So take the time before you get deployed. Don't wait till you get deployed and start learning about them. Find you somebody that is in ops or planning and start asking them about some of these forms and how they should be filled out, the information they need to be in there. And that way you won't get embarrassed like I did at a tactics meeting. Thank you, Kathy.
Oh, that was great, Chuck. Thanks. And I'm getting lots of chat about my screen. Give me 2 seconds and I'll try to get my video cut off so you guys have better bandwidth. Now let's go ahead. Eric, can you go ahead and talk about your perspective of basically beyond gap training.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kathy. I think for me, you know, one of the biggest lessons learned was, you know, I've been with the Red Cross a long time and have spent most of my career in service delivery and so recovery. When I think back to the first operation that I worked as a manager, you know, I didn't have any knowledge around, you know, being able to get data and run data and how to extract information that would help me to manage casework in a meaningful way. One of the biggest lessons learned I had was not being able to run client exports. As a leader, I feel like it's one of the biggest strengths that we can have as we move into more of move out of the tactical work and move into more of a leadership role. Knowing how to extract data from client exports, knowing how to run those reports, knowing how to sort, how to use specific criteria to drive the information that's needed in order to make really impactful and meaningful decisions on getting service delivery to our customers or to our clients. You know, using that data to triage, you know, who are the folks that we need to touch first and foremost and fast. Being able to develop skills around running pivot tables to go through all of that raw data, mass amounts of it, in order to drive decisions for the managers and the casework supervisors to, you know, to perform casework duties. You know, I think is one of the most critical things. One of the things that I have since done to help kind of ensure that, you know, I was never in a situation again where I didn't understand or I didn't know what to do was I sought a mentor. I sought several mentors that were able to help me through recovery and understand, you know, how to run those reports, how to use that data, what data to capture in order to drive those decisions needed from a strategic perspective, as well as just overall, you know, client casework and service delivery perspective. That information is so critical as we partner with not only health services and disaster mental health services and EOL and you know, the EMA teams out on the ground for the local county. You know, a lot of folks are asking for a lot of information, things that you know, even folks who are looking to gather specific information on how to get grants for community members who are of a certain population and demographics, et cetera. I mean, it's so critical to how we deliver care and support to our clients. I think one of the things that I learned is, you know, I have to run those things often. I have to reuse maybe the same template. You know, I can work smart and efficient by reusing the same information and then using pivot tables to capture that information in a way that I get the data that I want at exactly the time I need it, and exactly the right time, in order to really just you know, provide a better experience for our clients. So I think that's really a significant lessons learned for me on the recovery side. And I have always tried to take a bottoms-up approach with other recovery managers and other recovery supervisors who are new to that role or looking to make a jump into you know, into a leadership position. Because without that background, without that skill set, you know, those aren't things that you're taught in the class. So having a mentor that can really help you through that process will be critical to the success of leading recovery teams. So that's my lesson learned, and I hope that's helpful.
Eric, I think that was great. Thank you. And I think now might be an appropriate time to highlight there were a few read ahead materials that were provided on the SCED thing for our class. Please feel free to download those. Nothing critical for you to read ahead of this, but I think there's been a focus on data-driven decision-making. And again, reminder that that's one of those principles that we're it's expected of us as leaders to kind of identify what those are for our activities and really get a handle for how you can best support your decisions with data coming off of the response. And again, keeping in mind, we got three balls that we have to keep in the air: the service to our clients and the quality of that service, the experience of our workforce on the job, and stewardship of the donor dollars. And so anything you can do to support your decisions, that's just going to make us all better off in the end. So nice work there, Eric. All right, on that, we'll go ahead and turn to Belinda. And Belinda, I think, has a great series of some really practical lessons learned. Belinda, floor is yours.
Hey everyone. So it's actually interesting you talked about the numbers and the data-driven system that we're increasingly worked in. So of course that's a component of what I have to say, but just as a contrast, maybe I'll start with a slightly different point. So I'm going to start with a topic that says people are your most important asset. So that may seem like a funny topic to talk about from a logistician. But that's true. Can you see this? Can you see the presentation? It's just so you have something to look at. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. So people are your most important asset, even though I'm talking about logistics. So one of the first things that I learned that really was one of my most painful operations was Hurricane Sandy. The staff request form is your friend. That is the form you use to get to the right numbers you need to size the operation, especially if you're faced with a rapidly expanding operation, one that's ramping up. It's important to get the right numbers of people into your department to help you. It takes, a couple days, at least 1 to 2 days to get those people in. So in some ways, getting that request form in before you do other things is important because you need to get the ball rolling so somebody else can help you while you're trying to ramp up. So the staff request form is your friend. It helps you get to the right numbers for your department. The other thing that's important is to know who's on your staff roster. It's the next piece, which says, do you have the right people in the right place? So I was talking to someone today, I don't know if Tiffany's on, but she said your new best friends who are your incoming staff come in a lot of skill levels. So she's basically saying, you're gonna have a lot of people coming in and it's important to know what they can do, what they're capable, move them around, leverage these people. And so it's important to know your people and look at it every day and make sure you have that is exactly the department, the right size and the right people that you want there that can help make decisions on their own and a right level of independence and interdependence. So that is really important, is a really great team. I am going to also talk about something that says, which I call the initial intake. So I've had a few experiences where I've asked for a manager and the manager would come on and I would find out maybe days later that this person wasn't actually a manager, but had been sent in the manager gap, but they were actually a supervisor. That happens a lot these days because we're all under a lot of stress as an organization. So it's really important to actually take the time to do the initial intake, and a well-done intake is really golden. So you're asking them, okay, are you actually gapped in this? But not just if they are, but try to find out what is the level of their experience. Because a manager in one division, another part of the country, is not the same as what a manager is in the Pacific division. And I've learned that from experience. So what exactly are you listening for? So I don't have a great guideline, except there is a lot of intuition. But there is also, a lot of basic questions you need to ask them. How many DRs have you been on? What level DRs have you been on? Have you been on hurricanes versus wildfires? Have you always worked in district, or have you looked at headquarters? Have you had much experience supervising people? Do you know what the department requires? If you work in feeding, for instance, you ask questions like, have you only worked on catering contracts, or have you ever had to work with kitchens? Those are different levels of complexity, but it gives you a better sense of who's working for you. And also that kind of helps you to find a better way to be able to supervise them, to support them, to manage them, to kind of help them, reach better levels. But you also don't want to, to overweigh them with, with tasks that they might have trouble with. So, so it's good to take the time to have that intake. And if you don't, sit down and have a cup of coffee, have a one-on-one conversation, listen to their body language. Are they able to understand the high flow of information that's coming through. So those are some helpful hints. I just want to move on really quickly. So the next one, so systems, reports, and meetings. The other thing I thought is important, especially in logistics, is, as I said, is to get your systems in place. When you're facing a rapid expansion of your disaster, you need to get your delivery systems in place and your reporting systems in place. You want to get that structure in. That's particularly logistics thing, but it is probably equally important in some of the other areas, because those are not the things you want to worry about. You want to be able to meet the immediate mission. But if you suddenly had to expand your capacity, you would be able to do it. You'd know how much you'd be able to handle while you're bringing in more people. So I guess the last piece maybe that I want to say that's most important is about getting your 5266 numbers in. So that's been highlighted a little bit here, but again, I wanted to also say it's equally important here. So our DRs are more data driven today at all levels. The mission is important to deliver service and to care for people, but also get your numbers in, because at the manager level, you're more directly responsible for the quality of the data that's being produced. And that's very important, especially out of logistics. It's, supply and transportation produce a lot of the numbers of how much we're spending on the operation. And it is not an exaggeration that I've come in on a DR at like 8 a.m. and somebody is already at my desk telling me that, Brad noticed that the numbers of vehicles have gone down or gone up by 2. So he knows it went from 53 to 55. So people at all levels are really looking at this data, and they're going to be asking about you every day. It's important to get this system up early, even if it's not 100% accurate, because at least they're giving you the data, or you're giving them the data. And then after that, you can try to fix everything else. But that's a number that they look at every single morning to make decisions. All right, so I would say it's helpful for you to learn why your numbers are important, especially the ones that are in your area, and how decisions are being made off of that. So that's it.
That was great, Belinda. Thank you. And again, all part of that balance of 3 things: the quality service to clients, making sure they get what they need, that we can provide, taking care of our workforce and having a good workforce experience, and the stewardship of the donor dollars. The data feeds into making sure that we're maintaining quality standards on all of those 3 things. So that was perfect. Thank you. All right, Mr. Rivera, would you like to go ahead and tell us about your time as a brand new AD External Relations in Puerto Rico?
Can you hear me?
Got you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you for having me. I just to share with some of you, I don't know how many people we have on this call or what everyone's background is, but I'm actually going to school. I'm finishing my PhD at UC Riverside, and I touch on an area that's called social psych. So I look at the self and I look at structures. But one of the things I learned early on in my graduate studies was a term that was shared with all graduate students called imposter syndrome. And what imposter syndrome means is that when you feel that you don't belong, that you're not experienced enough to be, at least in this capacity, as a student. So how I'm using it today to describe my experience in Puerto Rico, or my overall experience in external relations in a leadership role, has to do with that. So if you can remember, and for the group that we have right now in this session, but if you can remember the first time that you were deployed in the supervisory role, it could have been as a supervisor in whatever gap. It could be the first time that you went on a disaster in the role of a manager. And it can also be the first time that you went on a disaster in the role of an AD. But remember how you felt when you were about to be deployed in this new role. Well, for me, I can remember just about every disaster I participated that I've deployed on. But the strongest memories I have on deployment has been at the times when I first served in this new role. In Puerto Rico, it was Hurricane Maria. For the time that I was there and was as a supervisor in external relations. And in 2018, it was a campfire in Northern California. And that was in my first role as AD. And if you can imagine, I don't know who's in this room, but imagine going on a DR, having some of the strongest leadership that we have for our region. And these are the people that you're sitting down with in this new role. And right to my right, I have Eddie Gilbert, one of the best people we have in logistics, managing the DR. We have Robin Friedman as the job director, who was just unbelievable as a supervisor. And then as soon as you get into the office, Denise Everhart is sitting right there. And then on the phone waiting for you is Luke Beckman. So coming in with these folks for the first time, it can be quite a bit intimidating. But it's great for our organization to have strong leadership, especially for our region. But on your first DR in a new role as AD, it can be quite intimidating at the least. But for our organization, again, when you're serving in this new role with strong leaders, it can hinder somewhat the process of sharing and learning information by those of us that are new in this role. And every one of us has experienced this, whether it's AD, manager, or a supervisor. But each one of the individuals I just mentioned also had a knowledgeable perspective that I learned from on that disaster. But they also showed a confidence level that as a police officer, I worked for 20 years in law enforcement, they showed a confidence level that I recognized that I saw when I was working. So to have that, to see that, and to learn from that was really helped me and developed me as an AD. So when you're assigned as a manager of the AD for the first time in the DR, you have so much on your plate when it comes to contributing, learning process, and leading those that you're leading within your gap and with your position. But one of the things to go about understanding this imposter syndrome that I spoke of earlier is that you're not sure if you belong. And in the case of me, the first time, I knew I had a place there, but it's like I had all these things run in my mind. Would I do this? How do I do that? And so forth, that it can hinder your contributions on the DR. So this occurs, I would say, with most people here. It occurs in all structures. It occurs with all organizations where people are put together for the first time and you demonstrate some strengths early on. But the reality is you have such strong leadership that it's difficult for you to contribute. But the more you meet, the more you train, the more you lead the group that you have that you're overseeing, the more you advance. This is all psychological. It's not a critique on our training or a disaster response. This is what we do. This is how we respond in disaster time. So, locally, when you see people who are exuberant confidence like Robin, Eddie, and Denise, these are people who have had to learn lessons the hard way from the mistakes that they made. From those mistakes, they were able to grow and reach upper leadership level. This will happen with all of us, and that's something that I now recognize now as I advance with the Red Cross. But a possible solution to go out on a DR is to perhaps personally engage with leadership at your local chapter, your region, people that you trust, that you've worked with, and people you'll be deployed with, and developing more familiarity with the role and position that comes with time and trust from those that you're assigned to work with on a DRO. It doesn't happen overnight, but for the most part, we start as strangers on a DR, and we end up as friends and family. But the next time you see people that exuberate this type of leadership, strong leadership, people like Robin, Eddie, and Denise, recognize them for their experience, but also understand that the mistakes they made to get to where they're at now is going to help us, and recognizing that will help us all get through this possible imposter syndrome that I speak of. Thank you.
Roberto, thank you so much. And again, we're always going to have the commonality of the mission and the breadth of life experience that our workforce brings to the table. That's always going to serve you all. So great message. Appreciate that. And now my favorite Wahine from the Pacific Islands, Ms. Bain, will you bring it home?
Hi, aloha everyone. My name is Renice. I am from the Hawaii chapter in the Pacific Islands, and I've been getting deployed as somewhere in the OM and ops and sometimes recovery. And just touching on everybody's stuff, my category was trust in yourself, but I kind of want to like Belinda, you guys have all touched on a lot of the important points. So I want to kind of bring in a different angle. And we were talking about making sure that we take care of our clients. But my experiences have all kind of gone back to behavior. So I'm a people person, and I notice behavior really quick. And so I kind of liken this to parenting. I have a dog. I have a lot of kids. I got 6 kids. So parenting, people would look at me like, well, you're supposed to know how to be a parent. True. But I have a daughter who's 21 years old with diabetes. And when she went into a seizure, I had no idea what the heck to do. I was in over my head. So I reached out by calling 911. And luckily, the dispatcher that answered the phone wasn't irritated that I bothered her for help. And I liken this, just because I'm a parent, it doesn't mean I'm supposed to know everything. And I liken this to the DROs because just because I can do a job and I have a skill set, when I go out into DROs, it doesn't mean I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm in over my head and I'm reaching out for help. And sadly, with my experience of being deployed, my ratio right now is for every 2 good leaders that I meet one really, well, I'm not going to say a bad leader, but a leader who has the opportunity to learn more. And I had my favorite mentors are like Kathy and definitely Chris. And so Chris and I had this really great experience in Louisiana. And like Roberta was saying, is that when we show up to the table and you have like the caliber of Eddie Gilbert and Denise Everhart sitting at the table, you know, they're being pulled in every direction. And so was Chris. And Chris, I went with Chris as my mentor, and he was not available. And sadly, when I had reached out to other mentors to ask for help, I was literally told no. And I was really taken aback because my very, very first experience with Red Cross, my very first DR experience was up in Vermont. I had the best bulk distribution manager and the best bulk distribution supervisor. And I thought, this is awesome. I would love to be a part of Red Cross because the experience was awesome. I mean, I got bed bug bites from that experience, but that didn't matter because I had great leaders and I came home and I was fired up and I wanted to learn more and I wanted to do more. And then sadly, when I went to my next DR, the manager we never met her. She was supposed to be at the desk, but we never really met her. And so all this stuff unfolded and it was like, well, that was not the same experience I had with Vermont. This was terrible. You know, and so as my experience of going out to more DRs, you know, I would have one manager that would be like welcoming, and then I'd go to a next DR and I'd have the manager yelling at people. And so my whole point to this is just going back and pleading with everybody that's on this phone, and if you know people who are supervisors and managers and you guys want to move up, it's like, please, please, please don't forget where you came from. Don't forget the struggles that you've gone through. And when there's someone there that's asking you for help, like, offer that. And if it's out of your range, if it's out of your leadership role to offer and be a mentor to that person, connect them with somebody you know, because you know somebody, or at least you know somebody who knows somebody. And so don't just leave them hanging out there. It was such a terrible, terrible feeling with every other response that I've gone to of being hung out to dry. And literally, like on that one DR, like Roberta was saying, imposter syndrome. I didn't need to criticize myself for saying I don't belong here because I knew I was in over my head. I knew I was lacking skills. But I know out in the Pacific Ocean, if something happens and you guys can't come help save me, I'm floating out in this water can all by myself until help can come. So I have to learn, and I had to learn the hard way. And Chris understood that. And that's why he was trying to like just not fast track me, but kind of fast track me. So I didn't have the skill set, but I didn't need to be reminded that I was an imposter because I had specific leaders on that DR tell me, I looked up your your experience on your profile, and you don't have the experience. So what are you doing here? And I had to explain. And I had one that was really gracious and said, I get it. I understand. What can I do to help you? And that was awesome. But I had another one that said no. And I said, well, can I just like not bother you and just sit in the back of the room and just kind of shadow and see how you come to the decisions? Because that I need to know, like if I could like dissect Chris's brain, I need to know what it is that he sees and how he's putting these pieces together so that by the time he gets off of the plane, he has a plan. Like I want that. And so while he was busy, I was asking another leader for it. But that leader was offended that I was sitting in a seat that I didn't belong in. And I can't apologize enough for having to be there, but there's a purpose and a reason why I'm there. And I just want to just plead with everybody that's a leader that there's people on your left and people on your right. And you're right, Belinda, you got to sit down with them and you got to find out to what extent and depth of experience they have. And if they don't have it, like be gracious and please like lend a hand and just know there's a whole big story behind it. And the ego's got to stay at home and just be there to be that family member that's going to say, let me help you and don't let me drown out there. So that's my spiel. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say that was awesome. Thank you, Renice. I was just going to that highlights it. We're a team. We're a big team. There are going to be lessons that we learn that are difficult and challenging for us. And if nothing else is taken away from this class tonight, it's remember, if you've been through it, if you've walked in the trenches and you're taking on the role of a supervisor in this organization at any level, that's our duty. That's what we have accepted in terms of the mantle of responsibility, making the path easier for the next person who comes behind us and making sure that that path leads that person to making decisions that lead to, again, the well-being of the client, the great experience for the workforce, and responsible stewardship of donor dollars. That's really all we've got, and we ran really short on time. That's a lot of my fault. But I want to say I'm collecting lessons learned in a survey tool. You'll have an email in your inbox. I got it to Kirsten late. You should have gotten it before the class, but there's a link to a survey in that email. There's also a link to the survey up fairly high in the chat. Please do, if you have a lesson to share, take the time to go ahead and fill that out. And I'll consolidate all of those and email those to those folks that are on the roster. Does anybody have anything they want to close us out with tonight? If nobody else does, I think we can just all agree that Renice has kind of provided us with the leadership credo for the Pacific Division. And I quote, "There are no bad leaders, just leaders with lots more to learn." We'll be offering the t-shirts on the DRMT this year for sale. You can register for yours there.
Awesome.
All right. Mahalo nui, everybody. If nobody else has anything, I'll go ahead and give you back 5 minutes of your evening. Wait a minute. I got stuff in the chat down there. There we go. There we go. Kirsten's got the link in the chat. Anybody else? Did I hear someone out there?
Yeah, I just want to know, what was that link to order a t-shirt?
Sign up for the DRMT and I'll hook you up.
No, okay. I need to know where to sign up for that.
You want to talk to your disaster workforce engagement coordinator in your region or your DPM.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys did a great presentation tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for your offer of support. I do need to learn things, and I know that.
No worries, we all do. All right. Nobody else has anything? I'm going to go ahead and hang up.
All right, thanks everyone. Remember, tomorrow night we have the art of delegation. So if you're interested on how you can help delegate and what delegation is, we'd invite you to come to our Confidence Builder tomorrow night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you all.